Good evening, everyone. It was good to be here in London today. It was important for Canada to be there with allies as we discuss the importance of standing united in defense of Ukraine and in pushing for a durable and lasting peace in Ukraine. We all have important roles to play, and we've recommitted today to continue to do that.
Coalition of the willing. What role will Canada play in that coalition?
Canada has been one of the strongest countries in support of Ukraine from the very beginning. For over 10 years now, we've been training Ukrainian defense forces. We're up to close to 40,000 Ukrainian troops that we have trained over the years. We're continuing to play a significant role in training, as is the UK, who is our primary partner in that. We've also invested close to $20 billion in supports for Ukraine, military, economic, and other. And we're going to continue to be there to support Ukraine as necessary with whatever it takes for as long as it takes, because Ukraine is not just defending its own territory, it's defending the very principles and values that underpin all of our democracies. So as we look at what's going to be necessary in the coming years, I can assure you that Canada and Canadians will be there. Le Canada est là pour l'Ukraine depuis très longtemps. Ça fait plus de 10 ans qu'on fait de la formation en Ukraine, depuis l'invasion illégale il y a 11 ans de la Crimée et certainement depuis l'invasion totale il y a 3 ans. On est là avec presque 20 milliards de dollars en appui. On va continuer d'être là pour l'Ukraine avec l'aide nécessaire. On fait partie des réflexions sur comment on va établir une paix, comment on va garder la paix et s'assurer que ça dure. Et à ce niveau-là, je peux assurer à tous nos alliés et surtout nos amis ukrainiens que le Canada continuera d'être au rendez-vous.
Prime Minister Starmer said specifically it will mean UK boots on the ground and planes in the air. From your answer, I am taking that will not mean Canadian boots on the ground. Is that, just to finish, is that the case, or are you considering Canadian boots on the ground in the form of peacekeepers down the road?
Every step of the way, Canada has looked at the ways it can best help. And as I've said a few days ago, everything's on the table. We know that the Canadian military has ways that it can contribute. We're not going to get ahead of the discussions on how to keep a peace that isn't yet in place. But Canada will be there and is open to doing what is necessary, but those will be decisions taken in the coming years by Canadians and their government.
Dylan Robertson of the Canadian Press. Prime Minister, in your audience tomorrow with the King, what is your message for him, and do you want him to speak out for Canadian sovereignty, whether that's in public or when he has his meeting with the President?
I look forward to sitting down with His Majesty tomorrow. As always, we will discuss matters of importance to Canada and to Canadians, and I can tell you that nothing seems more important to Canadians right now than standing up for our sovereignty and our independence as a nation.
And Prime Minister, what message did you have for Prime Minister Starmer? Did you ask him to speak up for Canadian sovereignty, and is it acceptable that he's taken a pass on that? I
can actually highlight that Prime Minister Starmer spoke during a PM question period last week, I believe, on how Canada is a strong and valued ally and partner. I know our allies will continue to be there to count on Canada and defend Canada in our strong sense of identity and independence.
Hi, Prime Minister. Tom Perry, CBC. You had some time, we saw today, to talk with President Zelenskyy. I'm wondering what you can tell us about what you discussed, and I'm specifically curious whether you spoke about his encounter with President Trump and Vice President Vance on Friday.
Obviously, I have spent a lot of time with Volodymyr Zelenskyy over the past years. We had a great sit-down just last week when I was, a few days ago when I was in Kyiv to talk exactly about how much Canada stands with Ukraine unequivocally and always, and how much we stand and support him personally as a president, as a leader, as someone who has devoted himself to protecting Ukrainians and indeed protecting the principles and rules that underpin all of our democracies. I have continued to emphasize to him that Canada will always stand with Ukraine.
You clearly admire President Zelensky, so I'm wondering what you thought when you saw the treatment that he received in the Oval Office on Friday.
I think, first of all, it's important every chance we get to lay out the facts as clearly as possible. In 2014, Russia chose to invade Ukraine, to occupy Crimea and parts of eastern Ukraine. For that, they were kicked out of the G7. And in 2022, they chose to violate the existing ceasefire and invaded Ukraine with the intention of taking Kyiv in 3 days and the entire country in 3 weeks. That has failed. Russia continues to try to fight to claim more land in Ukraine, and we could see an end to this war tomorrow if Russia decided to stop its illegal invasion of Ukraine. On Friday in the Oval Office, President Zelensky pointed out in so many words that Vladimir Putin is a liar and a criminal and cannot be trusted to keep his word in any way, shape, or form, because he has demonstrated time and time again that he will break any agreements. I stand with Volodymyr Zelensky, and I stand with the people of Ukraine. C'est important de se rappeler des faits. La Russie a choisi, il y a 11 ans, en 2014, d'envahir l'Ukraine, d'occuper la Crimée et des sections de l'Est à l'Est de l'Ukraine. Pour ça, ils ont été bannis du G7. Et il y a 3 ans, en 2022, la Russie a choisi de lancer une invasion totale de l'Ukraine et a essayé de prendre la capitale, Kyiv, en 3 jours et avait l'intention de prendre le pays au complet en juste 3 semaines. Mais ça fait 3 ans qu'ils continuent à essayer. Ils ont échoué de façon assez significative, mais ils continuent d'essayer de prendre du territoire ukrainien dans une guerre illégale d'invasion et d'occupation. Vendredi, le président Zelensky a souligné que Vladimir Poutine est un menteur, est un criminel, est une personne en qui on ne peut jamais avoir confiance. Tout engagement diplomatique avec lui, il a démontré à maintes reprises qu'il est prêt à tout rompre, et c'est pour ça que nous nous tenons aussi fermement du côté de l'Ukraine, parce qu'on ne peut pas faire confiance à Vladimir Poutine. Il l'a démontré bien trop souvent.
Je remarque, Christian Noël de Radio-Canada, je remarque que vous évitez de critiquer le président Trump parce que le spectre des tarifs cette semaine vous empêche de dire tout ce que vous voulez dire.
Ça fait plusieurs jours que nous avons des ministres à Washington, des gens qui ont présenté tout ce qu'on est en train de faire et d'investir à notre frontière commune, particulièrement pour contrer le fléau qu'est le fentanyl. On a pris des mesures extrêmement concrètes. On a ajouté des hélicoptères, des drones, des effectifs de personnel aux frontières. On a investi 1,3 milliard de dollars pour plus protéger nos fronts contre le fentanyl vers les États-Unis et les drogues et les fusils qui viennent vers le Canada. On a investi énormément et on a vu d'ailleurs une réduction significative juste depuis de décembre à janvier au niveau des chiffres du fentanyl. Alors, la justification pour les tarifs qui sont proposés sur mardi, sur le fentanyl, n'est tout simplement pas là en termes concrets. Mais évidemment, on sait que les Américains vont faire leur propre choix. Nous travaillons toujours pour essayer d'éviter que ces tarifs soient imposés. Mais si jamais ces tarifs vont de l'avant, comme vous savez tous, comme les Canadiens s'attendent, on a une réponse ferme, proportionnelle et sans équivoque. As you know, this past week we've had a number of ministers and heads of agencies, including the CBSA and the RCMP, in Washington to share the concrete measures that we've moved forward with on the border, whether it's the $1.3 billion that have led to new helicopters, drones, 10,000 personnel now across our borders. These are measures that have seen significant reductions in even the small amount of fentanyl that was passing across our borders. This is work that we are doing, as we always have, with the United States to ensure the safety of our border from illegal flows in both directions. The facts establish very clearly that Canada is not an issue in terms of source of illegal fentanyl into the United States. We had about less than 1% when we first started talking about this many months ago. That number is significantly lower than that, even now. But we all know the American administration will make its own choices in terms of tariffs. We will continue to work to ensure, to do everything we can to make sure that there are no tariffs on Tuesday. But if ever there were tariffs on Tuesday, as we have all seen, as we were ready to do last time, we will have a strong, unequivocal, and proportional response as Canadians expect.
Mais à la suite des événements de la Maison-Blanche avec M. Zelensky, pourquoi évitez-vous de critiquer le comportement de Donald Trump?
Ça fait 8 ans maintenant que je travaille avec le président Trump et je sais qu'on a pu réussir à faire de grandes choses ensemble, que ce soit au niveau de la renégociation de l'ALENA, le renforcement de l'OTAN. On va continuer d'être ferme dans nos valeurs canadiennes, mais on va continuer à essayer de rassembler tout le monde autour de valeurs et de principes communs. Et ça se fait avec des conversations directes, mais en personne. I have now been working with Donald Trump for about 8 years. And we've managed to get a lot of big things done. We renegotiated the North American Free Trade Agreement into a deal that works well for everyone. We've managed to strengthen and see NATO grow even stronger over the past years. There's many different things that we will always look to work with the United States, while at the same time being very, very clear in direct conversations about what Canadian values are and how Canadians expect us to stand.
Welcome to London, Mr. Trudeau.
Thank you.
There's a lot of pressure on European nations to increase defence spending, especially because it was front and centre of this summit today. Sir Keir Starmer has announced an increase in defence spending for the United Kingdom. But as you'll know, Canada continues to not spend enough. You aren't meeting your 2% target on defence spending, and the predictions are that you're not going to do that until 2030. That's not good enough given the change of events, is it?
Well, the world has changed. The time of peace that we had after the Cold War has been upended, and it is now necessary for countries to be spending significantly more on defense. And Canada is no exception to that. When I took office in 2015, Canada was spending, despite the NATO guarantee of a few years before, Canada was spending less than 1% on defense. It was my government that has tripled defense spending between then and 2030, and we're actually on track to reach that 2%. Now, we understand we all need to do more, and we are busy doing more, including buying 88 F-35s, moving forward on a dozen new submarines to help patrol the Arctic, making investments in NORAD, making investments in capacities, including making investments for Ukraine. And we will continue to do more. That is what not just our allies expect, that's what Canadians expect, and we will keep doing that.
But do you think that Canada will reach that 2% way before 2032? And just to follow up, we all saw the events in the Oval Office the other day. President Trump has been very critical of your own defense spending. Given what we've seen, do you see President Trump as an ally or an adversary in all of this?
The United States will always be an ally. Americans and Canadians and indeed allies from around the world have stood and fought against tyranny and fascism and Nazism and stood and died together on battlefields across Europe and in various places. We will continue to work together to build a stronger world. Le Canada et les États-Unis et nos alliés de l'OTAN vont toujours être là les uns pour les autres. Il y a des administrations qui ont des perspectives différentes sur un enjeu ou un autre, mais sur les grandes choses, je sais que les Canadiens peuvent compter sur le peuple américain et sur tous nos alliés quand vient le temps d'être là pour la paix et un avenir plus prospère.
You were, of course, Prime Minister during President Trump's first term, and he was adamant even then about the 2% NATO commitment. Do you think it's perhaps one of your biggest mistakes not to have addressed that in his years out of office, because he was always going to come back and press on that point again?
As I said, Canada has more than tripled its defense spending between 2015 to 2030. That was a decision that we took after a conservative government had allowed our defense spending to slip below 1%. We are now on track to reaching the 2%, and indeed, it's not about just focusing on the numbers, although yes, we need to reach those numbers. It's about ensuring that Canada has the capacity to defend the Arctic, to be there for our NATO allies, as we are in Latvia leading the enhanced forward presence. We are going to continue to be stepping up because, quite frankly, Canadian men and women of the armed forces are respected and valued and needed in contexts around the world. And the biggest grumble of many of our partners is, we love Canada, we just need a little more of you. And that is exactly why the Chief of Defence Staff has increased enrollment in the Canadian Armed Forces, and we're stepping up in a number of ways to ensure that we're increasing our defence spending, and I have no doubt that the next Prime Minister of Canada will continue to do just that.
With today have made many trips to Ukraine over recent years, trips that Vice President J.D. Vance called propaganda tours. Do you think now that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance themselves should travel to Ukraine to see what the situation actually is, given the factual errors they made in that Oval Office meeting on the situation?
I think there's no substitute for being there on the ground and seeing both the sandbags on street corners in Kyiv, talking with Ukrainians who express concerns for their loved ones, their brothers, their fathers who are on the front lines, but also see the resilience and the strength and the determination of Ukrainians as they go about their daily lives, as they continue to go to movies and eat on street-side patios and have a semblance of a normal life, even as an enemy country is busy trying to kill their family members and take their land. Ukrainians are an extraordinary inspiration to all who meet them. Canada is lucky to have the second largest Ukrainian diaspora in the world, and we have known for over 100 years how incredible Ukrainians are, and I think it would do well for any and all leaders who have the opportunity to go to Ukraine, to spend a little time with heroic Ukrainians who are fighting not just for their own sovereignty, but for the very principles that underpin all of our democracies.